Tonight, Roy Moore's supporters speak.
40 years ago in Alabama, there's a lot of mamas and daddies that'd be thrilled that their 14-year-old was getting hit on by a district attorney.
Rage in Jerusalem. And
oh my, nice TECHAPELLA.
Arizona Republican Trent Franks resigned effective immediately, ahead of reports that he offered an aide $5 million to be a surrogate for his child. Yesterday, Franks said he would step down in January after he admitted to approaching 2 female staffers about surrogacy. According to a report in Politico today, quote, "It was not clear to the women whether he was asking about impregnating the women through sexual intercourse or in vitro fertilization." Franks denies those allegations. President Trump declared a state of emergency in California as 6 uncontained fires ravaged the southern coast of the state, including a new, rapidly spreading blaze that's now forcing evacuations in San Diego. Combined, the fires are burning more than 160,000 acres across 4 counties, and all are less than 50% contained, with only 10% of the large Thomas Fire in Ventura County under control. Close to 6,000 firefighters are battling the blazes, which have destroyed at least 500 properties. British Prime Minister Theresa May struck a last-minute deal with the European Union to allow Brexit negotiations to move on to the next phase.
I believe we have now made the breakthrough we needed. Today's result is, of course, a compromise.
According to the agreement, Britain will pay a so-called divorce bill of between 35 and 39 billion pounds. EU citizens already living in the UK, as well as the other way around, will also have their rights protected, and there will be no hard border with Ireland. EU leaders are expected to officially approve the deal next week, so that talks can move on to trade. Dina Powell, President Trump's deputy national security advisor and a major force behind his Middle East policy, will be leaving her post early next year. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that Powell, quote, has always planned to serve 1 year before returning home to New York, where she'll continue to support the president's agenda. Disturbing body camera footage of a police officer killing an unarmed man in 2016 has been unsealed after a jury acquitted former Mesa, Arizona officer Philip Brailsford of second-degree murder on Thursday. The video shows the victim, Daniel Shaver, in a hotel hallway, on his knees, crying and begging not to be shot. He complies with instructions, crawling slowly towards Brailsford, who shoots 5 times with his AR-15. Brailsford testified that he believed Shaver was reaching for a gun, but no weapons were found on him. Brailsford and other officers were responding to a report of a person pointing a rifle at people from a hotel window. On Tuesday, suspended Alabama Chief Justice and alleged pedophile Roy Moore will face off against former U.S. Attorney Doug Jones in a special election for the state's open Senate seat. Polls show Moore leading by a 2-point margin. Republican strategist Frank Luntz went to Birmingham to ask a panel of conservative voters what they see in their candidate that the rest of America doesn't.
Are you all Christians here?
Yes.
Is Roy Moore a good Christian?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely?
Yes.
Without any doubt whatsoever?
I do not know the man.
That's something I can know necessarily.
Well, let me ask you this.
Nobody's perfect. Please explain nobody's perfect when you look at the things that he has been accused of.
Accused is not found guilty.
I want to know.
Just because I don't go to church every time the doors are open doesn't mean I don't believe. And God doesn't expect us to be perfect, but he does expect us to try and repent of our sins.
He's not my choice. I'm not voting for him because I like him. I'm voting for him because I don't want Doug Jones. But Roy Moore is entitled to the presumption of innocence in the law and in the Bible, just like anybody else should be. They're only accusations. There have been no charges filed. All you have is a group of women that have come forward and said...
How many?
7.
More.
No, there's really 3.
Higher. How many women have to come forward before you say, wait a minute, where there's smoke, there's fire?
It doesn't matter about legitimacy, not just how many.
Exactly.
How many are actually not being paid or being coerced to do this?
How many of them do you think are being paid?
All of them.
All of them?
All of them.
By show of hands, how many of you think all the women are being paid? Seriously.
To me, there are only 2 women that maybe have a smoking gun, but the women's, their reputations were questionable at the time.
Is this how you want to be treated as a woman if something were to happen to you? Do you want to be dismissed that way?
Better have proof.
It doesn't sound like it went beyond, there were still clothes on. It doesn't sound like it went beyond anything, and that as soon as the girl said she wasn't comfortable, he took her home.
I guess my question is, you blame her. She's 14.
I'm not blaming her. I'm blaming both of them. So I didn't say that I thought he was without sin. It's possible he did it, but it's possible that he could be forgiven for... I don't think he raped her.
And let's be real. It was a different world. 40 years ago in Alabama, people could get married at 13 and 14 years old. My grandmother at 13 was married. At 15, had 2 children and a husband and a job. If Roy Moore was guilty, if he was at the mall hitting on this 14-year-old, 40 years ago in Alabama, there's a lot of mamas and daddies that'd be thrilled that their 14-year-old was getting hit on by a district attorney.
I dated an older man at 16. So we don't really...
How old was he?
31. I'm not going to say that the 14-year-old, I don't believe her, to be honest. The one that said she was 14, I don't believe her. But for all of us, as a woman, I think we've pretty much all been in the situation where there's been sexual harassment.
I mean, think about what you're saying. You're calling all 9 of those women liars. 9 women. When it happened to you, didn't you want people to trust you?
I never told anybody. And
is that
I
good
didn't,
either?
and if I was going to tell somebody, I would not have waited 38 years to tell it. That's what's mind-boggling. Why wait till now at an election to come forward and say, oh.
Okay, Frank, what you're wanting to know is we got a bunch of conservatives here, and you want to know why we're going to vote for Roy Moore. My wife went to high school with Roy. She said in high school, Roy was a hard worker, an American success story, if you will. He always aimed for higher things. However, neither she nor I have ever voted for Roy up until now. And we intend to vote for Roy because of the opponent that's running. Right now, as far as I'm concerned, we've probably got 2 miserable candidates. In my opinion, we ought to go with a conservative. We ought to go with somebody that we know is going to vote conservative. And that's what I'm looking for.
Roy Moore is not a miserable man. This man has more integrity than you can find in the entire Congress right now. Don't fall for the George Soros assassination plan. The truth will come out. These women are all going to be proven, just like the 16 that went against President Trump, just right before the election.
What about the women who went against Bill Clinton?
The accusers of Clinton, everybody knows he's a womanizer.
Well, people think the same thing about Roy Moore.
With Bill Clinton, they went to the courthouse and they filed papers. They didn't wait 40 years to do it. That's a huge difference than just going to the media only 6 weeks before an election.
So I got a question for you. We recruited, there are about 60 people who wanted to be in this group, and you guys ended up in it. Not a single African American is in this group. Why?
Welcome to Alabama. Democrats.
That's the best you can come up with.
I was here during the Civil Rights era. We didn't have racial problems after the 80s because we went through it. When Obama was elected and he started his divisional rhetoric, Race relations in Alabama went the rest of the way of the country.
The race relations in the state of Alabama is really not that bad.
But what does it say
Why
that
does it
not
always
one
come
of
down
them?
to race? Why can't we just be Americans, Alabamians?
Because 97% of the African American community is going to vote for Doug Jones. Does that not concern you?
It does.
Yes, it does.
Yes, that concerns me greatly. It tells me that Roy Moore didn't do a very good job of getting out and campaigning.
So why aren't they voting Republican?
Because they listen to people, that are that have influence over them.
If they've been so destroyed, why do they keep voting for them? Why won't they vote for your candidates?
Well, in my opinion, they'd be stupid.
I don't understand that.
If you vote for somebody that's making you worse and worse, do you call that smart or stupid?
Isn't a better question why African Americans wouldn't vote for him? I mean, like, why do they want immigrants coming over and taking the jobs that they could be having? What do they believe? Do they believe a baby should be aborted at 9 months? I mean, I don't know.
Policy is everything. And if we don't stand for conservative policies, then we've lost anyway.
It was the day Jerusalem had been bracing for. Friday prayers at one of Islam's holiest sites in a city the US president now considers Israel's capital. And Israeli authorities had taken steps to head off any escalation of yesterday's protests. As prayers ended, the chants began. Israeli forces moved in quickly to shut things down.
عادة بتكون أعنف فبشكل بتتعامل في شكل عنيف جدا مع البشر. يعني إحنا تعتبرنك ليس بشرا.
17-year-old Amir Quresh is here with a group of his friends.
مش كل واحد واقف بلده، مكان صغير ومكان كبير، بتضلها بلدنا هاي. هذا بيت مقدس إلنا مش إلهم. إحنا ما في وجه إسرائيل، في وجه أمريكا.
But Jerusalem's mayor, Nir Barkat, says President Trump did the right thing by siding with Israel.
The reality is that the President of the United States realizes that connection, historical connection, to the Bible times, and expects and accepts the fact that Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people.
I mean, there must be a reason why the Americans haven't moved their embassy here for decades. This has been US policy throughout.
What I heard President Trump say is that, look, for 7 years, this did not bring peace. Not recognizing the city of Jerusalem did not bring peace.
What's your message for the Palestinians living here?
Accept the fact that Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people. There will never be any peace if you don't accept that fact.
Across the Middle East, there have been protests every day since President Trump's announcement. In Gaza and the West Bank too. But loyalties here have long been divided between different political factions. In recent years, the main political groups, Fatah and Hamas, have grown further apart. But that could be changing. This weekend, the groups are scheduled to finalize a deal under which Hamas will hand over control of the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian Authority. And common resentment against the US could now bring them even closer together.
We feel that President Trump has stabbed us in the back. It's so unfortunate and so disappointing that Mr. Trump made his administration participant in Israeli occupation and participant in violating international law.
Hanan Jarrah is still processing what the US decision means for a future Palestinian state.
For me, I believe too much in the two-state solution, and now after 23 years of signing the Oslo Accord, which is a prepaid bill for Israel, now after 23 years of our lives, we gain nothing.
She insists, though, that the Palestinians will come back stronger.
Do you think it's the end for...
No. As long as Palestinians can breathe, we will continue to our peaceful march towards our independent state. And that's it.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics announced this morning that the U.S. economy added 228,000 jobs last month, and the unemployment rate has stayed constant at 4.1%. It's good economic news for a Trump administration that's been promising to deliver just that since the campaign trail.
My economic agenda can be summed up in three very beautiful words: jobs, jobs, jobs.
But there's at least one number that's still lagging, and it's arguably the one that matters most.
Wage growth in the United States has been stagnant pretty much since the onset of the Great Recession. Even this year, with the economy doing well by all sorts of other metrics, paychecks still aren't growing like they should be. Average hourly earnings are up by only 2.5% in 2017, which is barely enough to keep pace with inflation. That's strange because the unemployment rate is extremely low right now. It hasn't been this low since 2000, and a scarce supply of available workers should mean that companies have to compete to hire people, which should lead to bigger paychecks. That's exactly what happened at the turn of the century, when unemployment fell below 4% and wages for ordinary workers rose sharply. There are a lot of theories about why that isn't happening this time around. Some economists say that the unemployment rate is misleading because it doesn't include the millions of people who aren't even looking for jobs at the moment. Some point to the fact that older workers are being replaced by younger ones who tend to make less money. But Austan Goolsbee, who is the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under Obama, has another theory: the increased power of corporations.
You've seen a huge increase in corporate profits as a share of the economy. So wages share of the economy, something like record lows. Corporate profit share of the economy setting record highs. We definitely have seen a kind of a consolidation of corporate power and strengthening in bargaining.
One solution could be deliberately strengthening the power of labor unions, which don't have the influence they did even just 20 years ago. Goolsbee says we should be investing more in education, which we know is correlated with better pay. But the Trump administration is pitching another solution: cutting corporate taxes. They say that letting companies keep more of their cash will lead them to pay their workers more. Goolsbee says that's not going to happen.
I think anybody who's say, the trickle down will come and we will all benefit. I think you got to answer, why didn't that happen over the last 25 years as the corporate profit rate rose to the all-time record level? Wage growth should be setting records, and it absolutely isn't.
If cutting corporate taxes doesn't change that, Trump's approval rating, which is already at a historical low, could dive even further. For the average American, it doesn't matter how fast the economy is growing or how much the stock market is booming, unless they actually see some of that money themselves.
Richard Thaler will be awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics on Sunday for his radical approach to econ. He looks at how real people make decisions. Before Thaler, most economists assumed that humans were perfectly rational, focused on the long term, and adept at calculating costs and benefits. Thaler, though, looks at people as they really are, driven by emotions and impulses, influenced by other people and the perception of the choices presented to them. Behavioral economics, the field that Thaler pioneered, may as well be called real person economics. Over his career, Thaler specialized in solving real-life puzzles, like why taxi drivers end their shifts early on their busiest days, and why consumers are more likely to spend a windfall on something frivolous rather than put it in the bank. But Thaler is most famous for a 2008 book he co-authored, Nudge, which argues that choices are imperceptibly framed by something he calls choice architecture, and that by framing choices differently, you can move people in one direction or the other. Take the unpleasant problem of urinal spillage. It turns out that putting a drawing of a fly in the center of a urinal can decrease spillage by an amazing 80%. Simply providing a target nudges men to pay more attention to their aim. Or take how we eat. It turns out people usually clean their plates. So they eat more if you give them a big plate, and less if you give them a small one. They'll eat healthier if you just make it harder for them to reach desserts. Framing can subvert our best intentions, or it can help us live up to them. For instance, everyone wants to save for retirement, but most Americans famously don't. In fact, when asked to join their company's 401k plan, many people don't bother to enroll. However, if the company automatically enrolls them, most people just stay enrolled. Simply changing the choice from opt-in to opt-out means people end up putting money away for retirement. Automatic enrollment in retirement savings plans, an idea Thaler championed, has more than doubled participation rates. So there are real consequences to choice architecture. And even small changes can make a big difference. It doesn't take a push or a shove for people to shift their behavior. It just takes a nudge.
The vocal network was almost kind of started as a joke. I told my friend at Google at the time that, hey, if they have a group, maybe we could get together and do some kind of sing-off. Fast forward 6 months, that's how TECHAPELLA was born.
The fade was a little flat, but otherwise it was great.
TECHAPELLA is a collaboration of a whole bunch of a cappella groups from different tech companies within the Bay Area. I was young and didn't have nowhere to run. Wise men say.
For Vice. Vice! From TECHAPELLA. Oh, my Vice! TECHAPELLA.
Hello, acapella nerds! Welcome!
You guys want to hear some acapella?
Let's do it!
We don't try to treat this as a competition, and we put in a lot of work to make this the best possible performance for our friends and family and the community. This year, we have an amazing lineup for TECHAPELLA at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music.
We are the Songbirds. We're from Twitter, of course.
We have Googapella with Google. Pintunes from Pinterest. Oh yeah, and we also have the Square Registers from Square.
Who can comfort you and drum it up? And drum it up.
It's just a whole bunch of people who happen to work for companies coming together and singing and throwing an amazing party.
We get in the taxi, kiss in the backseat, tell the driver make the radio play.
Tonight you will hear some really terrific a cappella singing ensembles.
Grab on my waist and put that body.
You'll also hear people who just really love to sing. Are they good people? They're great people. They're wonderful people. As far as how well they sing, let me put it this way. I think the great thing about music is that fundamentally is about bringing people together.
Being an engineer and being a singer are kind of intertwined. It sort of pairs the creative and the problem solving and the analytical kind of all in one package. So I find them actually really similar.
There's a lot of things that go through my mind in the moments leading up to when we step onto stage. I'm partly nervous, my hands are a little bit sweaty, but I'm super excited, I'm super stoked. I can't wait to go out there.
From Facebook, The Vocal Network.
solo was really tough. I mean, leading up to my falsetto, I was like, oh, I don't know, buddy. Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? But I pushed through, and, it was really amazing. It was just great to connect with the crowd.
That's Vice News Tonight for Friday, December 8th.